to another episode of Connected Conversations for Creatives, a place where creatives like you can learn, grow, and connect. I'm your host, Jennifer Carr. Question: what does it truly take to live a creative life? Is it simply about having a passion for your art, or is there more to it? How do we handle the inevitable setbacks and punches that the creative industry throws our way? And more importantly, how can we remain honest with ourselves about our goals, our progress, and our vision? As creatives, we often find ourselves in this balancing act between personal expression and professional demands. The journey isn't just about creating work that satisfies this inner muse. It's also about understanding the landscape around us, from the ins and outs of industry dynamics to the practicalities of making a living from our art. Navigating this landscape can feel like an overwhelming task, especially for those who are just starting out. That's why it's crucial to have mentors who can share their wisdom, people who have been in the trenches and emerged with insights that can guide our paths towards success. And speaking of guiding lights, today's guest is someone who knows all about living their writer's life and the broader creative endeavors that go along with it. Barry Lyga, a veteran writer with over 2 decades of professional experience, joins us today. Barry is not only an accomplished author, but also a passionate advocate for demystifying the creative process and the publishing industry. He's here to shine a light on how to roll with those punches, where those punches might come from, and how to let your work save you when you need it the most. This conversation promises to be as enlightening and as it is inspiring as we talk about the stories and the strategies of one of the most dynamic voices in young adult literature today. Barry Lyga, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jennifer. This is great to be here.
I am so excited. There's your story and your passion, like just through our pre-show communication, I'm like, this is going to be quite the conversation. But before we dive into the nitty-gritty, let's start with the basics. Where did your journey into writing start?
I mean, technically, the journey into writing started when I was 6 or 7 years old, and my grandmother said to me, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "I want to be a writer." And I can't tell you where I got that idea. That is one of the great mysteries of my life. I have no idea what made me think writing was something I could do, or writing was something that you could do for a living. I didn't know any writers. It's not like we had, it's not like I had an uncle who'd published a book, or, the guy across the street had written some books. It was nothing. I don't know where it came from. But that was the beginning of it. And she, she was this great old Jewish lady. And, I said, "I want to be a writer." And she looked at me and she goes, "That's nice. You want to starve." She was kidding, of course, but when you're that young, you don't understand the sarcasm. So I took it very seriously. And I liked the idea of being a writer, but I also liked eating. And I spent a lot of my life trying to figure out, how can I be a writer and also eat on occasion? And it's too bad that she passed away before I managed to break in fully. She was around when I published a couple small things and some short stories and things like that, but nothing that I was making a living off of. But I like to think that if there is a heaven, she is looking down on me and she's like, "Oh, he didn't starve. Good for him." So
I love that. Oh my gosh, to know that early on, like, this is what I want to do with my life. I cannot imagine.
Well, and it's funny because now I have children who are around that age range, and they tell me what they want to be, and there's that party that's like, "Yeah, right," but then I'm like, wait a minute, I did it. Like, they might actually end up doing this thing that they want to do at the age of 6 or 7 or 8. So I have to take it very seriously. I can't poo-poo it or just dismiss it. It's like, oh no, you might actually end up doing that someday.
That is wild. So did you find yourself always just like imagining, even if you weren't writing things, did you have a super active imagination as a child?
Oh God, yeah. Much to my detriment.
Yeah.
I would daydream constantly. I was constantly being caught off guard by things because I was thinking about, time traveling salamanders or whatever. Yeah, definitely. But it never occurred to me to actually write these things down until I was a little older, until probably, I don't know, 12 or 13. That was when I thought, I should start to write these things down. That coincided, this may or may not be a coincidence, but that coincided with when I got my first computer. And suddenly it seemed like, oh, I can just type these things up and print them out. Oh, that's kind of cool. I'm old enough that we still printed things out back then.
Right.
So yeah, that was when I started writing things down, and I somehow had it in my head that the way I wanted to write books, I knew I wanted to write books, but for some reason I had it in my head that what you did was you started off writing short stories, and you published short stories, and then what would happen is somebody would see one of your short stories and say, hey, would you like to write a book? And then you would go, why, yes, I would. And then you would write a book. And the thing is, I'm not a really good short story writer. So I set myself up for many, many years of frustration as I was writing short stories and trying to get them published. And I got a few of them published. I mean, I'm a decent enough short story writer that I had a few published. But novels, that's my métier. That's my happy spot, you know? And so it was when I really sat down and started to write novels that things happened.
I love that. Yeah, no, my editor is constantly saying, Jennifer, that's still too many words. Like short stories are not my jam because there are just so many words that I need to use. And
yeah.
I can totally relate.
My brother joked once. I wrote a book, and it was only like 45,000 words, which is very, very short. And my brother joked, that's a Barry Lyga short story, 45,000 words. And I'm like, you know what? That's not that far off.
To my own self be true. I mean, honestly.
Exactly.
That is so funny. Okay, so when did you publish? When was your first work actually published?
I mean, it depends on how you're counting.
Okay.
In the mid 90s, I published some very terrible comic books. Just not good. I didn't understand. I was too wordy, you know, honestly. Like I didn't understand how even though I'd been reading comic books my whole life and I loved comic books, I didn't have an understanding of the byplay between words and images. And I wrote too much. And so those were not great. But I think that was pretty much the first time I got paid for, you know, making clicky clack noises with a keyboard. Which was a nice feeling. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
And then in 2001, I published a short story in a literary journal, and that was a big deal for me. And I was paid in contributor copies.
Nice.
But it was still one of those things where you could show it to your parents and be like, look, there's my name and it's in print. And there's no pictures. It's not a comic book, you know? And they were like, oh, okay. Not bad. And then 2006 was when it all took off. That was when my first novel actually came out. So I sold it in 2005. It came out in 2006. And it's, you know, it's just been since then 26 more books after that one. Yeah, it's been a crazy ride. It's funny because I still think of myself as the new guy. When I sometimes I meet young writers and they'll be like, "Oh, what do you think about this and this and what's your advice?" And I'm like, "What the hell do I know? I'm new. I'm new." And then I'm like, "Oh no, I'm really old now. Oh, when did that happen?" So yeah.
Well, and you know, you write young adult literature, so you know it keeps you young at heart, right?
It does. I mean, I tell people all the time that I'm still 15 inside. I never progressed. I mean, you talk about Arrested Development. I never progressed beyond 15, and so every morning when I look in the mirror, it's a shock. So I'm like, why is this guy have a beard? Why is it gray? Why does he have no hair? You know, that can't be me. And so it is. It's a constant shock, you know, that I'm an old man. But yeah, I write YA. I write a lot of YA and I write some middle grade. And as a result, like I feel like I'm still 15. I feel like, you know, I could go to high school any day now and take algebra again.
Yeah, I couldn't do that in high school. So that would definitely not be me. No. That's so fun. No, I love that. And so you've had experience writing comic books. You've written short stories. You're writing novels. Do you ever go back and dabble? Like it feels like you've kind of progressed, but have you ever just gone back and been like, oh, let's try comic books again?
Oh, yeah. No, I did a graphic novel called Manga Man, which came out in 2011. Again, I'm an old man, and that was a lot of fun. I did that with Colleen Doran, who is one of the top artists in the field, and I got lucky there. She and I, when we were both younger, we had been in the same comic book fan club together, and we hadn't been in touch, in 20 years. But I told my agent one day, I said, if I had an ideal artist for this project, it would be Colleen Doran, but don't call her. She's really busy. She's doing all this stuff and she's too busy, but that kind of person is who I would like. And my agent said, okay, I understand. And then 10 minutes later, my agent calls me back and says, so I just got off the phone with Colleen. But I told you not to call her. She goes, yes, I didn't listen to you. So then Colleen and I got on the phone, and Colleen was like, this sounds like a lot of fun. Let's do this. So we did the graphic novel, and that was a lot of fun. And I've actually got 2 or 3 different graphic novel ideas floating around right now that I am finally getting serious about and showing to some publishers, and we'll see what happens. But I would love to do some more of that. Absolutely.
That's fantastic.
I feel like I have to make up for the really bad ones I did back in the 90s. Like I owe the art form a decent comic book because I did such a bad job.
Redemption. That's what we're looking for. Okay. Yep. That's fantastic. Yeah. My daughter is an artist. She can, where it came from, I don't know. Like there's just a genetic thing in her from somewhere that she can sit down and she just draws these characters and they're phenomenal. And she drew this one character and I said, "Oh, we should turn him into a graphic novel star. Like he should be a main character." And so I started writing out this outline and I created this outline and I'm like you. I can't use too few words. Like I can't narrow down my words. And I'm like, it may just be an actual story. Like I don't know if I can make it into a graphic novel, but
I will tell you what helped me. I had a lot of trouble when I wrote the graphic novel for Colleen. It was very difficult. But recently, within the last year or so, what made me decide I want to try some more graphic novels is I found this amazing app that is designed specifically for writing comic books and graphic novels. And it's a little weird and it's got some strange bugs to it and everything, but it helps you get into that flow. And one of the cool things it does is it tracks your word count for each word balloon that you write. So it's very easy for you to keep track of that and figure. It's sort of like when you're writing a tweet and it's telling you like you only have 5 characters left, that kind of thing. This does something similar to that. And so it helps you. It doesn't give you a limit, but it just helps your brain process. Oh, I've already used 20 words. Maybe I should cool off here. And it's got the best name for an app that is for writing comic book scripts. It is called Superscript. And it's terrific. It's at superscript.app. I do not get paid by these. I don't even know the people. It's one guy. He wrote this app and I'm pretty sure it works on Windows and Mac. And it's great. It made it so that I sat down and I wrote like 100 pages of a graphic novel script, which I don't think I could have done. I mean, I could have done it, but it would have been a lot more difficult and taken a lot longer, but I had the right tool. It's like having Final Draft if you're a screenwriter. It just helps you so much because it does some of the nitty gritty stuff for you. It does some of the formatting for you. It's the same thing with Superscript and comic books. So,
okay, thank you. Like that's perfect, and we'll put that in the show notes because who knows who's listening that's like, oh, that sounds great.
I see the faces of that app every time I talk about this.
Well, and you bring up such a good point. Like, if you want to get a job done, you have to use the right tool. The right tools, and that comes whether you're writing a book or anything like that. So this wasn't really even in my list of thoughts or anything for today's conversation. But what are some of the tools that you use that have made you a better writer in general?
Well, I can't say they've made me a better writer, but they've made me they've made writing easier for me.
Yeah.
But certainly, again, Final Draft if you're writing screenplays, Superscript if you're writing comics, and like everybody, I think I use Scrivener when I'm writing novels. Scrivener. The thing about Scrivener, I started using it. 15 years ago, I think, when it first came out, and I used it for like a day and a half, and I was like, nope, I'm done. I'm never touching this thing again. And then a couple of years later, the second version came out, and I thought, all right, let me give it a try again. And what I realized is Scrivener has roughly 10,000 features. And most writers only need 5 of them.
Yeah.
But for every writer, it's a different 5. So that's why it has 10,000. So the trick is download Scrivener and figure out which of those 5 features are most essential to you and go from there. And it's just, again, it's one of those things where it takes a lot of the formatting thinking away. It takes a lot of the scut work of writing. I need to move this chapter. Well, great. In Scrivener, you just drag a little icon. You don't have to copy and paste everything. You can color code. When I'm doing books that are multiple viewpoints, I will color code each scene to that character so that I can just glance over at the list and go, oh, it's been a long time since I've heard from this guy. Maybe I should do something with that. So again, you probably only need about 5 of the features and just ignore the rest of them. They're not going to hurt you. So it's a really cool app. And that's one that saves me on a regular basis. I think since 2008, 2009, somewhere in there, I think every book I've written has been in Scrivener. So let's see. So that's Scrivener and Superscript and Final Draft. What else? Other tools. I think a good note-taking app is important. And I spent a lot of time. I have very particular needs for my note-taking app because I'm very particular about how I do that. I use an app called Notebooks. Notebooks.app is the website. And it lets you set up books, and then under the books you have documents, and you can just drag in web pages or images or text files or whatever, or you can create notes right in there. And the great thing is it's Mac, it's iOS, it's iPad, there's a Windows version, and it all syncs together, and that's what I needed. So I use that. There's a really terrific app called Hemmingboard it's just a thesaurus, but the way it works is really cool. While you're working, you can just hit a key shortcut and a keyboard shortcut, and it will automatically look at the last word you typed and then pop up a window with synonyms, antonyms, rhyming words, all that kind of stuff. And it's such a silly thing, but it's very cool.
Uh-huh. Thesaurus.com is always open on my browser.
Right. The cool thing about it is you don't have to do that cognitive switch from I'm writing in Scrivener to now I have to go look at thesaurus.com or whatever. It's right there. Your hands never leave the keyboard, and so that's very good. Speaking of looking at a web page, though, another thing that has been incredibly helpful to me is the app Freedom, which again, I think it's freedom.app, which what Freedom does is it shuts off your internet to the computer that you're working on. And it does it in such a way that you can't get it back. The only way to get it back is to restart your computer. And let's face it, you're not going to restart your computer.
Right.
So, and you give it its user configurable time span. You can go anywhere in increments of 5 minutes, from 5 minutes up to a couple of hours. And you can even set schedules if you want, where every day from 2 to 4, my internet's off. And the great thing about it is, that way you can't get distracted. You can't be distracted by Twitter. You can't be distracted by Facebook. The bad thing is if you're suddenly I need to know, who was the president of South Africa in 1952, you can't look that up. But that is why you type in your manuscript, look this up later, and then you get it. So I do that for myself quite a bit. That's a huge help. I think those are most of the big tools that I use, on a regular basis. There are some specialty tools for other things, but I will also say, I preach this: authors have a backup strategy.
Yes.
I think I'm going to write a book about this. I cannot tell you how I happen to be very tech savvy. I'm a gigantic computer nerd. Mm-hmm. And so all of my author friends call me when their hard drives die or when they accidentally delete their chapter. And usually I can help, but I always tell them, look, you got to set up a backup system somehow. And you should definitely have, I think this is automatic on Windows, but on the Mac, it's not. You have to get an app for it. Have a clipboard history app.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, for those who don't know, it's an app that, when you copy and paste something and then you copy something else, it gets rid of the last thing you copied. A clipboard history app will preserve like the last 10, 20, 30, 100 things that you copied or cut, no matter what. And that way you can go, oh my God, I lost that whole chapter. This happened to a friend of mine. She copied a chapter, she cut a chapter to move it someplace else in the manuscript. And then she had to copy something else. And she copied it. And then she realized, oh my God, I just lost that whole chapter. And I was like, look, there's nothing I can do, but I'm going to put this app on here so that from now on, that will never happen to you. So, have a backup strategy. A backup strategy is not, oh, I have a thumb drive that I plug into my computer every now and then. That's not a backup strategy. And have a clipboard history app, because I cannot tell you how many times that has saved me or saved a friend of mine. You got to have those. Those are critical tools.
Yes, and I've never heard of a clipboard app, and like that is something that I just figured, oh well, I made a bad choice, No, I have to live with it.
I am punished for my bad choices. No, this is not a Catholic system here, where you are punished by the Lord for mistakes that you have made. There is a route to salvation that goes straight through the clipboard. No.
Praise be, like,
yep.
That's awesome. Oh, okay, well, thanks. Like that was a rabbit trail that I wasn't really planning to chase, but I think that's.
I didn't expect it, but you get me talking about writing and technology, and I just go on forever.
I love that, because that's where we are, right? We're not using typewriters, and most people don't handwrite. Though I have seen some crazies out there handwriting their stuff, and I'm like, if that works for you, more power to you.
Whatever works for you, works for you.
Right. Like my hand and my brain don't communicate that quickly, so
right.
Yes, it has to be, there's technology everywhere, but we do have these pitfalls. And so like, oh yeah, turn off my internet for a certain amount of time, because do you know how much time we all waste just sitting there doom scrolling because the last idea I had wasn't good, or I can't come up with anything else. So I'm going to, it's terrible. So no, those are great. But let's talk about your literary journey here. You've shifted between, comic books, short stories, novels. You also shifted between genres, right? Like you went from thriller, superheroes. Like how does that work inside your brain to be able to just shift gears like that?
Yeah, it's tough to say how it works inside my brain, because it's the only brain I have access to.
You don't understand, yeah.
I don't understand how other people don't do it. It's like, I was raised by a Catholic father and a Jewish mother. And so we celebrated every holiday you could imagine. And people would say to me, oh, wait, you celebrate Christmas and Hanukkah? Like, how do you do that? And my response was, how do you not? So I never understood that. It's the same thing with my brain. All I can say is, I grew up reading comic books and then science fiction and horror, but also Paradise Lost and Edgar Allan Poe. And then I went to Yale and got an English degree. And when you take all those things and you mix them together, you get a guy who really wants to write comic books, but also the next Paradise Lost. And so I try to do all of that stuff. And I just, I've never discriminated between ideas. People will be like, oh, you wrote this book that my second book was called Boy Toy, and it was judged by Booklist as one of the 50 greatest YA novels of all time. And so I wrote that, and then I wrote The Flash, and people are like, wait a minute, this does not compute. I'm like, no, I take The Flash just as seriously as this, award-winning, literary novel, because I don't know how to do it any other way.
Interesting. That's wild. And so you can switch your brain from this storytelling to this storytelling. Mine, I can't do that. Like I have been trying to work on a 1.5 to go between my first two books. At the same time, I'm writing a totally different series, and I'm just like, I can't, my brain doesn't flip like that. So I have to finish this whole thing over here before I can even think about going back. I've tried, but I can't.
Yeah. I mean, I'm usually working on 3 or 4 things at the same time. It's just the way my brain works. Like I have spent my entire life teaching the couple pounds of gray matter between my ears how to write, and it can't do much of anything else. So that's what it does all the time. I'm always working on it. I'm always thinking about it. And yeah, it's, I don't make a distinction between different types of stories. They're all stories. They're all projections of our of our intellect and our emotion and our experiences and our empathy into the world. And no matter what kind of story you're telling, that's what you're doing. And I always, I don't know. I love using my imagination and trying desperately to put something into the world that never existed before and could not have existed if not for me. Like that's the egotistical way of looking at it is, can I make something that nobody else ever made and nobody else could ever make? Just me.
Yeah. Well, okay. So from what I've researched and that kind of thing, you have a series called I Hunt Killers. Yes. Correct? Yes. Okay. And it was, from what I understand, like it's a little darker, right? It's got some darker themes to it. And you wrote it for a young audience. And so like, that's something that people you just don't see that, right? In that genre. So how did you approach writing something like that? How do you break through those molds that are set?
Yeah. I mean, the good thing about writing a book like I Hunt Killers, I've always had a very uncompromising attitude. My feeling has always been whatever the story needs is what I'm going to do. And if there's a problem with that, then you have a problem with the story. Because this is the story. There was some brutal stuff in those books. For those who are listening who don't know, I Hunt Killers is about a 17-year-old kid whose father is one of the world's most notorious serial killers. And as the book opens, the father's been in jail for a few years. The kid is just trying to get by, trying to survive with this reputation that his father's a nut job and everybody assuming he's a nut job. And then bodies start showing up in his hometown. And he thinks, well, everybody's going to figure it's me. So maybe I should go figure it out to prove to them that it's not me. And if I'm really lucky, at the same time, I'll prove to myself that I'm not going to end up like my dad. So that was sort of the premise. And there's a lot of darkness in there. There's a lot of gore. And I wrote the story honestly. I told the story honestly. And when people said, oh, that's too much, it's just enough. It's just right. This is what the story needs. This is what the story requires. And if you don't like it, then you don't like the story. Yeah. And I suggest you not read it, because if I take that out, then it's not the story anymore. So that's always been my attitude going into it. And sometimes that's worked for me and sometimes it has not worked for me. Certainly there are times where I pushed ahead and ended up with something that I was very happy with, but that the world went, maybe not, dude. But when you've got 27 books out, that's going to happen a few times to you. So yeah, I mean, it was something where I never think to myself, oh, this book is going to be for kids. I like to say I don't write for kids, I write about kids.
Okay. And
it's great that kids like to read the books.
Yeah.
But I'm writing about them, not for them. And if I stop to think about who's going to read this book, I'd never get to finish it because I'd be too much in my head about it. I mean, honestly, if I had known someday I was going to have children, I probably wouldn't have written some of my books the way I did. Because one of these days, they're going to take those books off the shelf, and I'm going to be like, wait, not that one.
Not that one.
Not yet. So, it's something where the first person I try to please is myself. And I figure if I please myself, somebody else out there is going to like it too. And with I Hunt Killers, I decided, I'm like, this is going to be like, I have an issue with how serial killers are often portrayed in our pop culture. They're often these tortured, sexy souls, they're creatures of the night. And I'm like, no, like I've done so much research on them. They are twisted, vile, disgusting monsters.
Yes.
And I wanted to be honest about that.
I love that. No, that's great. And I was literally just we're talking 2 hours ago, I was having this conversation with somebody that, you write for yourself first. Yeah. You write for yourself first, the story you want to hear, that you want to read. And there will be other people out there who that story was meant for them to read. They will get into it, and if they don't like it, it wasn't meant for them. You know, like that's how it goes. It's just your readers will find you, and you will find your readers.
I published a little while ago a book called Unedited, which is sort of the work of my career. It's this long, in manuscript pages, it was about 1,000 pages. It's something like 215,000 words. And it's just this insane book. And I had several publishers say, look, if you can cut it down or cut it in half, make it 2 books, we'd publish it. And I'm like, nope, it's one big giant book. Like, that's what it is. I can't help it. Sorry. And it took me 10 years to finally find a publisher for it. And we published it, and it came out a couple of years ago. And I had joked, I was like, there's a worldwide audience of 10 people for this book. But for those 10 people, it's going to change their lives. And about a month or so ago, I stumbled upon a review of it by this young woman, and she wrote this it was like a 5-page review, and it said everything in there that I had hoped to hear. And I was like, there you go. I found one of them. 9 more to go. That this book was for her. And she said in her review, like, I felt like this book was written for me. And so I replied to the review. I left a comment, and I said, it was written for you. So, you know, that so sometimes the audience for a book is in the hundreds of thousands or the millions, and sometimes it's in the single digits. But you write your book and you hope that it finds its audience.
Oh, for sure. So let's shift gears and talk publishing. What is your status? Indie, traditional, hybrid? Where are you on the publishing spectrum?
I mean, I'm definitely 99% traditional publishing. I did self-publish a book about 10 years ago called Unsold, which UNSOUL''D, which was a very adult book about an author who sells his soul to the devil in exchange for a hit novel. Don't know where I came up with that. And just crazy, sexy hijinks ensue. And so that was for adults, and I self-published that mostly as an experiment, just to see what it was like to do something like that. And I actually enjoyed the process quite a bit. But other than that, it's been all traditionally published. I will probably self-publish again at some point. I just, right now, I'm very busy, and it takes a lot of time to do it right, I think. Mm-hmm. But I enjoy the process quite a bit.
Okay. Can you tell us kind of about your experience in becoming traditionally published? Because I know that there are a lot of authors out there who it takes patience, right? It's not something that somebody's going to come along and swoop you up and immediately. I mean, that's a 1 in a million kind of story out there. So what was your experience like getting into the world of traditional publishing?
Well, I mean, I will tell you with the caveat that this was almost 20 years ago. Yeah. And the industry has changed dramatically in the past 20 years since I got in. But roundabout somewhere in 2005, I guess, I met my agent at a writers' conference. We met in person, face to face, and we got along very well. And she said to me, "Do you have your book with you? Do you have your manuscript?" I said, "No," because they tell you don't bring your manuscript to the to the show. Nobody wants to carry it home. At that point, people weren't emailing stuff yet. It was you were still bringing big fat packs of paper. So of course I said, "No, I'm not an idiot. I didn't bring it." She goes, "Why didn't you?" I'm like, because I'm not an idiot. She said, "Well, email it to me, as soon as you get home." I'm like, "All right, I'll email it to you." So I did. I emailed it to her when I got home, and she called me like 2 weeks later, and she's like, "Look, I'm in the middle of it. I love it. I think it's genius. I have to do something else for a client, but please don't accept an offer of representation before you talk to me, because I want to finish reading this and get back to you." I was like, "All right." And there was another agent looking at it too, and that was a weird story. But the long story short, I ended up signing with her, Kathleen Anderson at Anderson Literary Management, and I've been with her ever since. And so, I signed on with her, and this was, February, March of 2005, I guess. And she said, "All right, I'm going to put together a list of people to send this to," and it felt like it took forever. It was probably 3-4 months, which, again, feels like forever. And then she said to me at one point, "Okay, I'm sending it out." And it was like 5 people, I think. Five different people she was sending it out to. And I remember she called me one day. I was on a vacation, and I had visited my grandparents in Connecticut. And I was about to drive up to a cabin in Maine and just be like isolated from the world for a week. And I get a call, and I had like one of those old chunky cell phones, pre-iPhone. And she calls me and she goes, "Hey, I just heard from so-and-so at Random House. They want your book." And I was like, "Oh my God." She goes, "So I want you to talk to them and make sure that you could work with them." So I was like, "Okay." She goes, where are you? And I told her, I said, I'm on my way to this cabin. She goes, oh my God, you got to call them right now. So I'm in the car driving to the cabin in Maine, and I talked to the editor, who was very nice. And I'm like, yep, I could work with this woman. And then what happened was we went to auction because there were 4 other people still out there. And my agent said, look, I'm going to tell those other 4 people that we have an offer, and we'll see if anybody else makes an offer. I said, okay. So this was July, I guess. And I will never forget, August 5th, 2005. It's like a holiday in my house. I got a call from my agent, and she's whispering on the phone. I'm like, why are you whispering? And she said, well, I'm in Japan on vacation, and it's 2 a.m. here. And I'm like, why are you calling me at 2 a.m? It's 2 a.m. here, and I'm at a traditional inn, and the walls are rice paper. So everybody would hear me if I didn't whisper. So she's whispering. She goes, do you want to know the result of your auction? I'm like, well, yeah. And basically 2 of the publishers had dropped out. 3 of them stayed in. They made offers, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, Houghton Mifflin, Margaret Ramo at Houghton Mifflin wanted this book, and she also wanted the next book.
Oh, nice.
So, which I hadn't written yet. So, so I was like, oh my God. I mean, I went from somebody who had published, a couple short stories and some comic books, to suddenly knowing that I would have 2 books, at least 2 books published in the world. And I couldn't believe it. I was blown away. And that was how I got in. And I did a total of 5 books with Houghton Mifflin. It's not like I left Houghton Mifflin, that nothing happened.
Right.
It's just that there were other projects that I could only do at other publishers. So I started to move around a little bit. I think I've worked with like 8 different publishers at this point in my career, which is kind of crazy to think about. But yeah, that's how it started. That's how I got in. I don't know how it happens anymore. No idea at all.
Tell you what, I chose self-publishing for a lot of control reasons. I like having that control. I like easing into things. I don't want to just jump into the deep end. Yeah. I did query, I sent query letters, and that's a whole process in and of itself. And, and I feel like everything is so inundated right now that it's nearly impossible without an agent. So that's one of those things that people, you do kind of need to start at the beginning.
I do feel like it is impossible without an agent. I mean, you get those 1 in a billion shots, but it's impossible without an agent. And the thing is that the agents are overwhelmed too. Yeah. The agents right now are where the publishers were 30 years ago. They're overwhelmed. My wife is also a writer, and she didn't have an agent because she'd been doing mostly ghostwriting. And she was looking for an agent, and she was having trouble. And she had a history. She'd written several very successful books as a ghostwriter, and she was having trouble. And I got to witness that very intimately. I get to watch her, go through that. So it's really tough. And I think that, I think publishers are trying to figure out what the future holds. And when they don't know what the future holds, they become extraordinarily conservative.
Yes.
Which is understandable, but not ideal.
Right.
And I think that's where we are right now.
Oh, I agree. And this kind of leads into our main topic of conversation, right? There are times where you find yourself rolling with these punches, as you will, as we called it, just in your creative career. So what are some times, your wife looking for an agent, that kind of thing? How about you? What are times where you've experienced these moments, and how do you handle them?
I'll answer the second part first, how I handled them. The answer to that is not well. It's difficult. A friend of mine once said to me, I had given something to an editor that I'd worked with quite a bit, and I really liked it. And the editor, and I just assumed it would happen. And the editor came back and said, you know what? I just don't think this is the right thing, and we're going to pass. And I was shocked. And I remember a friend of mine who's an author, we got our agents in our first book deals right around the same time. So that was kind of cool. I remember she said to me, we thought that once we heard yes, we would never hear no again. Mm. And that was just a really good way of crystallizing it. Mm. And I thought, yeah, that's exactly what it is. And that's sort of ridiculous if you think about it, to think, oh, I'll never hear no again. That's absurd. But there's a part of you that thinks that. And so, I mean, I've had, I was on a panel once and we were talking about something or other, and I answered the question, and the author next to me said, well, it's easier for you to say that because whatever you write will get published. And I didn't respond to it because I couldn't think of a way to respond without sounding defensive.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, I mean, yes, I've published 27 books. Okay, let's say that. 27 books. I have had, in that same time period, probably 8 or 9 that I haven't been able to publish.
Yeah.
Like I said before, I had unedited. That took me 10 years to find a publisher for that. And that was at the height of I Hunt Killers, which is my biggest, most successful series, where the common wisdom would be, oh, he can publish whatever he wants. No, I couldn't. No, I couldn't. Nobody would publish unedited. So I think what I have learned in the past, I did not deal well with that. Part of it, I think, is like PTSD. When you decide you want to be a writer at 6 and you submit your first short story to a magazine at the age of 12 and you get nothing but rejections from the age of 12 to 25, then when you get another rejection later in your career, you immediately feel like that child again. Like, oh, it's never going to happen. I'm a failure, blah, blah, blah. So I didn't deal well with it originally. And now what I have decided after many discussions with friends and other authors, the only solution, and people have heard this before, the only solution is the work. The work is the thing that will save you. All you can do is keep writing. I showed a friend of mine once, I made a graph of my sales for each book. And I showed him the sales trend because I was in a spot where I was at a real low point. And I was really miserable about it. And I didn't know what to do. And, it's not, when I talk about sales, it's not, I mean, yeah, I like money. Everybody likes money. But it's, the more you sell, the easier it is to do your next book, is what it is for me. Like if I made $1 billion from my next book, I mean, yeah, I'd be happy. But it really would mean, oh, I can definitely do my book after that. So I was very concerned I wasn't going to be able to do another book based on the sales of the last one. And I was showing this to my friend, and he was pointing out, he said, look, you had a dip here too. But look what came right after that. You had this big spike here. And he's like, if you'd given up here, you never would have gotten to that spike. And I was like, yeah, you know what? You're right. And so I really do think you just have to keep writing because you never know what's going to be a success. You never know. It is not for us to decide what succeeds and to what degree. We just craft the stories and we put them out there in the world and we cross our fingers and we tweet about it, and that's really all we can do. And, I'll be honest with you, I was at a point a couple months ago where I was like, I don't know what to do next. I had a couple things that my agent was shopping around and we were waiting to hear. And I will tell people right now, no matter how long you think it's taking an agent to get back to you with your query, it is, again, 27 books. It is taking forever for people to get back to me right now. It's just, everything is very slow. Everything is slow. I think it's a COVID hangover. And so everything is taking a long time. And so, in the past, I would give a book to my agent. She would send it out and I would wait a month or two for people to get back. Now it's longer. And I'm like, what am I going to do in that time? If it takes 6 months, if it takes 8 months, if it takes a year, what am I going to do in that time? And I didn't know, and I couldn't decide. And I was pretty miserable. And then, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, something like that, I thought, you know what? I'm just going to sit down and I am going to write the first 30 pages of as many books as I can think of. And whichever one really sticks with me, I'll keep going. And it's fun because there's zero pressure.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, I almost said a bad word. It's not like, oh, bleep, I have to write 90,000 words with these characters and I don't feel like doing it, or I don't know if that's going to work. It's, no, I'm going to write 20, 30 pages. And if I'm not feeling it, I'm moving on to the next thing. And it's fun.
Yeah.
And that's what it should be. It should be fun. Writing is hard work, but it should also be fun. And if it's not fun, if you're not having fun, your reader's not going to have fun. Ooh. That is one of the wisest things I ever heard. A comic book writer named Mark Waid, who I really, really admire, once was talking about writing and writer's block and that sort of thing. And he said, if you're slogging through part of your story and it's difficult and boring to you, how do you think the reader's going to feel when they read it?
Mm-hmm.
And that just blew my mind, because we have this attitude of, I'm having trouble with this part, but once I get through it, it'll be fine. No, it won't be. If you're having trouble with that part, the reader's going to have trouble too. Go back and redo it so that you're not having trouble with it.
Yes. It's almost like you're saying, start back where you began. And because I remember, sitting down to write that first book, it was just like, I love this. It felt like therapy every day. We were just moving through it. And go back.
My first book that was published, The Astonishing Adventures of Fanboy and Goth Girl, terrible title. I swear to God, if I had known that was going to end up being the title of the book, I would have come up with something else. I titled it that, and I thought, they'll make me change it. We'll come up with something better. Nope. Everybody's like, we love it. Great. So, when I wrote that book, that was actually the technically fourth novel I had written in my life. None of the other three, nothing ever happened with them. But it was the fourth one. And I will tell you, I sat down, I remember it to this day. In 2004, I sat down to start writing it. And I got about 3 pages deep into it. And I went, oh, yeah, this is the one.
You felt it.
This is the one that gets me published, because it felt so different than the other ones. It wasn't hard work. It was work, but I was enjoying it, It was like if your job is digging a ditch and you get that endorphin rush, and you're just loving digging that ditch. I was loving digging that ditch.
Yes. And I think not only do you feel it, but like you said, like the reader knows. The reader knows. That. So the first book of my current series that I'm working on, like I was in the zone. I felt it. I was in it. And I think I felt I put too much pressure on myself when I started the second one, that I was like, I need to get this out. I need to do it. And by the time I hit, the last page, I went, God, this book is boring. Like I was so bored with it. And I thought, this is terrible because the characters are so lovable. There's so much potential. And so I sent it to my editor and I was like, it's boring. I'm sorry. Just tell me how to fix it. And she was like, okay. And she was like, you're right. It's boring. And I was like, I got so boring.
The funny thing is too, like you can't always trust your opinion.
Right. Because she kept going to tell me that was probably not
right. I will tell you the story of with my very first book. We were very close to publication date. It was going to be on the press very soon. And, you get to a point when you're publishing a book, you have to read it 1,000,000 times. You write it, you revise it, you work on it, you give it to your editor gives you some thoughts, you look at it again, your copy editor gives it to you, you look at it again, you get the page proofs, you look at it again, and you're sick and tired of that book, right?
Yes.
You're so sick of it. And I got to the point with my first book where I called my editor, because by this point I'd finished my second book. And I called my editor and I said, look, hear me out. This first book, it sucks. It's bad. Why don't we publish the second book? Because that one's good. And she's like, what? I said, the first book, it's terrible. It's awful. I hate it. Everybody's going to hate it. But this new one that I just finished is really good. So why don't we publish that one instead? Why don't we publish a good book instead of a bad book? And I'll never forget. She's, Barry, the book is good. I'm also going to publish the second one. Don't worry. It's all fine. And of course she was right, but it was just like massive panic, because I was so tired of it at that point.
Yes.
It's been 18 years since that book came out, and I can finally look at it.
I
think I could probably sit down and read it. It's been 18 years. It's tough, man.
Oh my gosh, no, but that is so true. Because you do. Now, what's really funny though is with my first book, there's a scene in it where something devastating happens and it's very emotional. And the first time when I wrote it, I cried. The next 6 times I read it, I cried. And then after that, I was kind of callous and I was like, will you please stop? I'm so
But see, that's good though. Like if you have that sort of a reaction, that's an honest reaction, you know what's coming. I will say, there have been a few times in my career where I've reread something I wrote and burst out laughing. I'm like, that must really work. That's gotta work. If it's catching me off guard, I wrote it and it's catching me off guard. I didn't laugh when I wrote it, but I'm laughing when I read it. And so, and I've had some stuff I've read where I'm like, oh, that makes me really uncomfortable. Particularly in unedited, there was stuff that made me really uncomfortable. And, I made the conscious decision. I'm like, I need to leave this in. If it makes me this uncomfortable, it has to be in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad you made yourself cry.
I did. Thank you, multiple times. Now, I'm over it, but when people read it, I still get messages. That was 2 years ago, and I still get messages. I can't believe you did this. I literally, 2 weeks ago, I had a lady stop me at church and say, I can't believe you did this. And I was like, do I comfort you or run? I'm not sure.
Right. No, whenever I have people tell me that I made them upset or I made them cry, I always say, I'm not sorry.
Right.
Like, I wish I could apologize, but I'm not sorry at all. It's like Stephen King once said, he was talking about people having reactions to his stories, and he said that he figured the best reaction that he could get to one of his stories, the highest compliment someone could pay him, would be if they were reading one of his books and had a heart attack and died. And he said, I would feel terrible. Like, I would feel awful that person died, but there would be a part of me going, damn, that worked. So, yeah.
Go. Yikes, that's funny. Oh my gosh. So, speaking of all of our work and heart and soul that we've poured into things, what projects do you have coming up that you want to share with us?
Everything is in flux right now. I've got a couple of different things that my agent is shopping around. So I don't know what's going to land first. So it's tough to talk about. Can I talk about something I'm excited about though?
Please.
This is going to sound so stupid, but so years ago I had a newsletter and I never knew what to do with it. So it sort of just foundered and I didn't do anything with it. But I recently relaunched it and I'm having so much fun with it. And it's low volume. It's once a month. And it's like goofy stuff I find on the internet that I think is interesting, and like deleted scenes from my books that you can't see anywhere else, and like weird comic book panels taken out of context. And I'm having so much fun. I just pushed send on one of them this morning. That's why I'm thinking about it. I'm having so much fun with it. And like every month I get close to the end of the month and I go, oh, I get to write the newsletter and send it out. And I'm so excited about it. It's just ridiculous. But anyway, there you go.
Well, that's fun. That is wild because I literally despise writing a newsletter. Like, I hate it. And that is so common. Like, I hear that all the time. So to hear somebody say they love it.
I love it because what I did, I will tell you the secret. I'll tell you the secret I found to loving it. I decided to stop talking about myself.
Oh, yeah.
I decided to stop saying, here's what I have coming out. Look, this book's on sale. Look, I'll be at this school next month. I stopped doing that. I was just like, I was talking to my wife and she was like, what would you just like to tell people? And I was like, you know what? I find weird links on the internet that I think would be fun. And I've got 27 books. I've got probably 3 or 4 novels worth of deleted crap. It's just fun stuff that just didn't fit into the book for one reason or another, and I've got a comic book collection that's way too big that has goofy panels that make no sense if you don't read them in context. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to have fun. I'm just going to send out this newsletter and it's just going to be for fun. What I can give to people, give back to people who've given me so much, just give them some weirdness in their lives. And that's what I did. So
I love that because that is one of the biggest things. It's like, nobody cares. Nobody cares what I'm doing. If they want to know what I'm doing, who cares? I don't read too many newsletters.
If they're gonna buy your book, they're gonna buy your book. Like, they don't need a newsletter to tell them to buy your book. Like,
And what's the number one thing, especially for self-published authors? The number one thing, the advice you're given: start a newsletter, grow that newsletter list. And I'm going, but why?
Yeah.
Please don't make me. I don't want to. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we're at the point of the show where I'm not the host anymore. You are. We're going to flip the script, and you now can take the reins and do with it what you will.
Okay. I want to ask you this question.
Okay.
Because I'm devious.
Okay.
What is the absolute worst writing advice you've ever gotten?
Writing
People are always like, what's the best writing advice? I'm like, I don't care about the best writing advice. What's the worst writing advice you've ever gotten?
Oh, like writing advice. There's probably been plenty of it. Ooh, geez, you've stumped me. Okay. I will say that querying while you're self-publishing, like to do that, they're constantly saying, go ahead and self-publish, but do you know how hard to backpedal? Like, there's too many people out there not taking self-published books. You've already self-published it. They don't want it, and so that was probably and that's really more of a publishing and not a writing situation. Yeah. So I'm a terrible self-editor. Like, I go back and I self-edit constantly. And so it's hard for me to get words on a page. I've gotten a lot better, but that was something that they were like, constantly, you should self-edit before you send it to an editor. And I'm going, I can't, because I'm so critical of I'm already struggling to get through it. So I think to thine own self be true, honestly. Like, that's one of those things where if you know your strengths and your weaknesses, and mine is self-editing, then do what's best for you. Don't try to conform to what everybody else is trying to tell you. Like, their format and their methods, they may not work for you, and that's okay. There's not a one size fits all.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when it comes to self-publishing, like, what have you found to be? Do you self-publish? Do you just e-publish, or do you also do hard copy?
I do hard copy.
You do hard copy? Okay. Yeah. That's cool. No, I love that, actually. I never did a hard copy for my self-published book, and I'm going to do one this summer, because I'm like, I love laying out a book. Like, it's fun for me.
Yes.
So I'm like, I'm going to do that. But what have you found is the most bang for your buck in terms of promotion or just getting the word out about a book? If you say your newsletter,
believe me,
I will not be held responsible for my reaction.
Okay, great. It's definitely not my newsletter. I will tell you, like, I literally, the last day of April, I was like, oh, shoot, I have a reminder on my phone that says, have you done your newsletter? And the answer was no, I haven't. So, and it goes out May 1st. So anyway, so not my newsletter. I will say that literally connecting, like engaging with people, I have a love-hate relationship with social media. Like, I love it because that is a way to connect with people that you never would have connected with before. And it's fantastic. And it's also time consuming, and it's a death trap, right? Like, you get sucked into it. But I will say that just directly engaging with people who are looking for books that fit the description of the one you've written, or making book recommendations of another book that's, not yours, but, and then you've already got this door open where it's like, and if you like that one, you're really going to like this one. And coming across as salesy is not my thing. And so I hate making posts that's like, go buy my book. Yeah. No, like, literally, I want people to connect with me, the author, because I like connecting with people, obviously. Yeah.
So, but which social media platforms have been most helpful to you?
I have the most direct engagement through Facebook. TikTok is fun. I love it. I find I can use more creativity on that side of things. Yeah. But the videos of mine that have gone viral had nothing to do with my books.
Yeah, I just got on TikTok a few months ago, and I enjoy it, but I don't understand how it works at all.
Yes.
But again, I'm old. TikTok is for young, and I am old.
I am not a spring chicken. Don't get me wrong. I'm the old lady out there.
But it is funny. Like, I've had a couple of posts on TikTok that have gotten big engagement because one of my books is banned these days. I mean, ridiculous book banning all over the country at this point. And one of my books is usually a target. And so I posted something about that, and I got a lot of haters coming on, but I also had people supporting me. And then every time I talk about that book, even if I'm not talking about the banning, people ask me questions about it. I answer the questions. Yeah. And those posts just always get a lot of engagement.
Yeah.
But and I do TikToks about writing advice. Like, here's what I think about writing advice, and sometimes those are big, and sometimes they get nothing, and I'm like, I don't understand why.
The algorithm, I don't either. Like it's a luck of the draw is what that is. But I'm with you. The videos that I've done, I have a series called Psychology and Writing, where I talk about my background is psychology, and I talk about how to use psychology to develop your characters, how to create realistic, relatable characters. Yeah. And those get a pretty big draw from other authors and writers and that kind of thing. But as far as my books, it's like other people who post about my books get better engagement than I do.
Right. Like, wait a minute. Yeah, I don't understand how any of it works at all. And I'm not saying that in an old man, like, oh my Lord, this doesn't make sense. I'm saying it in a mystified sense. Yeah. It's so much of it it's just a black box with no window into it, and which I know is the point. But yeah, it's so weird. Okay, so Facebook and TikTok work really well for you. Okay. I just don't understand Instagram. Like, I'm not a picture taker. I'm not a picture maker. Like, so, that's out of my wheelhouse. Yeah, I refuse to go on Instagram. Somebody is squatting on my name on Instagram. And the thing, it's clearly a fan because they posted some stuff about I Hunt Killers. But this was like 10 years ago. And then they didn't post anything else. So I got in touch with Instagram and I'm like, hey, like, this clearly a fan doing this. This is my name. Trust me, I'm the only Barry Lyga in the universe. Like, I checked. Could you please give me this? And they're like, nope.
Thank you so much.
I'm like, you know what? Screw you, Instagram. I'm not going to get it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no. And honestly, like, it's not engagement friendly. Like, Instagram's never, in my opinion, been one of those that's like, hey, let's build a community on Instagram. Right. No, it's let me show you something that I liked, Yeah. So yeah. Oh yeah. Okay, so I'm going to take the reins back because I want to ask you, how can listeners connect with you? Clearly not Instagram.
Yes, not Instagram. Do not connect with me on Instagram. The best way, the way I prefer, honestly, is through my website, barrylyga.com. There's a contact form there. There's an FAQ there. There's all kinds of crazy stuff there. And, if you use the contact form, it comes to me. I will look at it. I will see it. And I will respond, unless you're completely insane. But yeah, so there's that. But also, I am on Twitter as at Barry Lyga. I'm on TikTok at Barry Lyga. I am on Tumblr, barrylyga.tumblr.com. I am on Mastodon, which is where people started running to when Elon bought Twitter. And I am on Blue Sky, which is a lot of fun. It's very small, but it's a lot of fun. I think that's everything. I'm pretty sure that's everything. Okay. Well, and also my newsletter too. Like, I'm going to pimp my newsletter again. barrylyga.com/newsletter to sign up. Again, it's low volume, and one of the cool things about it, I think, is it's interactive. Like, if you email a question, to the newsletter address, I will get it. I will read it. I will either answer you directly or I will answer it in another newsletter. Nice. So if you want to connect with me, that's a pretty good way to do it too.
No, that's great. And we're going to put all of that in the show notes. So it's as easy as heading to the show notes and clicking a link and following. So definitely go sign up for the newsletter because it's going to be way more entertaining than if you sign up for mine. But please sign up for mine because I want more newsletter readers.
Sign up for both of them. Sign up for both of them. It doesn't cost anything.
That's right. And it's really not that boring, I promise.
Yeah.
That's so funny. All right. I have one final question, and it is the big question. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. What is the one piece of advice or encouragement you want someone to walk away with if they hear nothing else?
I think it would have to go back to what I said before about the work will save you. Between the ages of 12 and 25, I got nothing but rejection. Literally, not a single yes, just a sea of no's. And what happened was I would get depressed and upset, and I would stop for a while. I'd say, you know what? I'm done. And then 3 months later, 4 months later, 6 months later, I'd go, argh! I was like Pacino, and I would start up again. And this was a cycle, again, from 12 to 25. And I lost a lot of time. Mm-hmm. It probably wouldn't have taken me to age 25 if I had just stuck with it. But I wasted a lot of time being upset and licking my wounds. And I'm not saying that if you're miserable writing that you should, tie yourself to the desk and force yourself, but you have to really be honest with yourself and really think about it and think it through and be consistent and be thoughtful about how you're working. Because at the end of the day, the work is the only thing that will save you. There is nothing else coming to your rescue. The work is the only thing that will save you. You will finish a book and you will go, that's better than the last one. And then you'll finish another one. You go, that's even better than the one before that. And eventually you'll get to the point where you go, this is a good one. And then you're ready. Yeah. And I truly believe that. Be honest with yourself. Take time when you've finished something, put it aside and start working on something else. Take 6 months to come back to it. Look at it with fresh eyes, new eyes. You will see all the problems. If you're me, you'll hate yourself and you'll quit because you'll be like, well, I guess I suck. It's like, no. It's like, no, you've gotten better in those 6 months. That's why you can see the flaws now. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. It means you've grown and changed and progressed and moved forward. So keep doing that. People get impatient. They finish. They want to, the internet makes it easy. You can finish a manuscript and publish it 5 minutes later.
Yeah.
5 minutes later. Don't do it. I beg you. Please don't.
Nope.
Take your time. Take your time. Believe in the work. Use the work. Let the work guide you. That's what I truly believe.
I think that's fantastic advice. And it's not something that you hear all the time. A lot of times people think, okay, so I'm not good enough. I have to stop and I'm not coming back to it. Or I'm going to start 14 different projects and not finish a single one. So, I think you have to find that balance.
Yeah, that is a big thing. That's probably the second piece of advice I would give people is you have to finish something. I can't tell you how many writers who want to break in tell me, well, I'm working on a book and I like it, but I've got this other idea that's so much better. And I'm thinking about moving over to that one. I'm like, look, do whatever you want. We've all had projects, fall apart on us and we're just better off kicking them to the side of the road and moving on. But especially early on, you need to finish something. Yes. You need to know what that feels like so that you can aim for it with the rest of your projects. If you're constantly stopping in the middle and moving on to something else, you are never going to finish anything. And unfortunately, there is no market for half-written books. If there was a market for half-written books, I'd be rich because I got a ton of half-written books. So, yeah.
It's like a Mad Lib, right? You can finish your story.
I would love to publish a book that's like where you've written like 250 out of 300 pages, and the last 50 pages are blank, and you just fill it in yourself. Just finish the book yourself, man. I got tired.
You know what? That's actually kind of a fun
idea. It's actually not a bad idea. Damn it. Somebody's going to listen to this and do it. Somebody's going to listen to this and do it and make millions of dollars.
We got to get started today. I hope you have nothing else going on.
I know, seriously. My kid doesn't have to go to the doctor. I'll just do that today.
It's fantastic. I'll pick one of the half-finished projects you have sitting in your backlog.
Right, exactly.
That's awesome. Oh, Barry, thank you so much for this conversation. I think it was a much-needed conversation. There was a lot of encouragement and uplifting and just a lot of how-to or, don't give up. I think if somebody leaves without hearing what they needed to hear, that's on them.
Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Absolutely.